Um, the country star Kenny Rogers died recently. You may know. He was 81 years old, not of coronavirus, incidentally. I wasn't I wasn't hugely familiar with his music, but I always knew that distinctive sort of resonant, uh, manly yet soothing voice. I quite liked his stuff. Ruby, the Gambler, so on. And his duos with Dolly Parton. I think he'll certainly be missed in the world of country music. Um, but anyway, that's just generally about the fact that I've been thinking about music recently, just you know, m- um, different genres of music, and I'm someone who isn't really a hardcore fan of anyone. There's no single artist that I would go out of my way to go and see. I mean, I like Billy Joel, for example, but I wouldn't pay a huge amount of money to go to see his concert. Not because I don't think it's not worth it. I'm just not that into any artist. Any artist. Um, when it comes to music, I like a wide range of styles. I like some rock. I like electro, swing. I like some indie music. I like some pop. I like certainly a lot of classical music. Traditional folk music around the world. And like I say, some rock, some older rock and roll, some country. So I can't really pinpoint, my likes. I like trance. I can get into trance. That brings me to rap or R&B. And I imagine this video is going to maybe goad a few people. That isn't my intention. I just feel that there are some things that need to be said. Few caveats here. These are just my opinions. I'm not telling anyone they have to agree with me. And all I would say is if you're going to comment critically, please watch the whole video before doing so. Sometimes people leave comments and I can tell they haven't watched the whole video, they haven't seen the whole context of what I'm saying. So that's all I would ask. Yeah, um, I'll be quite honest. I'll just say this outright so you know where I lie. I hate rap culture. I hate R&B, specifically rap culture. Now, that might sound like a sweeping statement, but I'm saying that to get attention, to draw attention to the subject that I want to raise here, because I think it's kind of politically incorrect to say that. Why? Because it is particularly popular in African American culture. If you criticize R&B or rap, it's seen as a racial thing. Like you don't, you're disrespecting black people, or it's some sort of racial connotation to that. It wouldn't matter if I said I quite like blues music, I like soul music. I think Aretha Franklin was amazing, Michael Jackson for that matter. So I could say all that. People will still interpret it whatever way they want, and it's largely beyond my control. If I was a public figure, this would be going viral. It would be like, oh, Nathan Hayes that said this. How dare he? But just hear me out. Wikipedia, any prominent rapper, and I'm using rapper here in loose terms. Sometimes rap and R&B is interchangeable. They're not exactly the same thing. With any music genre, you're going to have some overlap, and you'll have purists saying that isn't the real thing and that isn't. So I'm talking in fairly broad terms here. Rap, right? I think we all know what rap is, broadly speaking. It emerged in the Bronx, 1979. And like every genre of music, it's had different sort of eras. Um, but Wikipedia, any prominent rapper, and almost universally you will find the article on their biography says legal problems or controversies. It's almost universal with rappers. Some maybe more so than others, but it's almost universal. Now, before I get into this, I am not for a second suggesting that you don't have controversies in other genres of music. I mean, black metal, for example, when you get really extreme hardcore goth bands, for want of a better term, like Murder Dolls or others. And again, I'm not, I don't want to pretend that I'm an expert on the purity of music, right? So I'm not going to spend a lot of time saying, oh, this is black metal or this is death metal or whatever. That's not what I'm trying to do here. And the same applies for rap. So there's going to be different genres of rap. I mean, it's going to be different subcategories of rap. So I'm talking in broad terms, but I still think there is a trajectory and a trend. And I reserve my right to say what I think from what I'm seeing with this and what I see with this. Um, yes, it's subjective, but I think it's also based on a lot of valid contentions. So that's the first thing. It seems to be a very big problem. Okay, you can see in the world of rock, metal music, you've pretty much a lot of controversies as well. I mean, the whole rock and roll or rock star lifestyle is pretty chaotic. When you look at some of the prominent British bands, for example, Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd, pretty much all of them have some pretty twisted stories along their history. Um, so people might say, oh, well, why aren't you focusing on those things, Nathan? Why aren't you focusing on the negative side of rock or metal? Put simply, because I don't think it has the same influence on its fans. I'm not saying it has no influence, and I'm not saying that there isn't the same power of influence there. But when I look at, for example, the problems in America's inner cities, and this can be extended to other countries, but if I'm just focusing on the United States, you look at the sort of gang warfare that goes on in cities like St. Louis and New Orleans and Chicago, um, and other cities, Los Angeles. That sort of gang warfare is generally not from a sort of fan base of heavy metal or rock. Let's just be honest, it's not. When you hear of young rappers being shot, it's almost, I don't want to be insensitive, but it's almost like, well, what's new? Rapper gets shot. It's just such a cliche. Um, and it just happens so much. And then you have these outpourings of grief. And of course, it's sad when someone dies young. But, in almost every case, frankly, these guys are not saints. I mean, look at Tic Tic Tentacion, domestic violence, um, a criminal record as long as your arm. So I just find it a bit phony to treat these people like angels or treat them like, oh, they were so young and so innocent. When really, the truth of the matter is, a lot of prominent rappers, I'm going to say something here, and in the United States, I know this is seen as a racial thing. I really don't. In the UK, it's less racial, so I'll just say it. Glorified thugs. Glorified thugs. I don't care if they're black, white, or Hispanic. It's just a thing. If you're constantly singing about drugs and fast money and disrespecting women, you cannot demand respect. I mean, sure, you could demand respect in the criminal way, like respect me or I'll shoot you. That sort of, aggressive respect. But I do question, what are they really contributing to society? I know some of them do benevolent things. I know some of them maybe open youth centers and so on. Fair play for that. But the industry, the rap industry, I would say is far more negative than positive. So the fact individual artists may do some benevolent things, I'm talking about the industry, okay? I'm not trying to vilify each and every single rapper. I'm just saying that within the industry, I would say definitely the trend is more negative than positive. I mean, you cannot tell me that if people are singing, like I say, this is the lyrics, you're going to get fast cash, and the only way to be a man is by this aggressive, swaggering behavior in a gang. It's toxic. It's utterly, utterly toxic. And I just don't see what positive comes from it. Now, just for the record, I'm not calling for rap to be banned. That's never been my position. Because, for one thing, I don't think it's all bad. And secondly, it wouldn't be practically possible. And constitutionally, it wouldn't be possible either. Um, Here's the thing. For me, it's not so much the actual music. I mean, the sounds. There are some rap songs, or let's say some rap songs. I actually quite like the melody. I can see why people would get into that. I'll give an example. Lil Wayne's, I think it's called President Carter. I like the beat to that. It's quite, it sounds pretty cool. It's well juxtaposed with the actual President James Carter, Jimmy Carter's inauguration. So I see what he's doing with that. It's quite clever. Some of Eminem stuff, I could definitely get into the beat of that. So for me, it isn't the sound itself. People might say this is whatever, but it's the lyrics. It is the lyrics, and it's the lifestyle. Because if rappers were genuinely just the messengers as they so claim, this is the thing I find a bit galling about the whole rap industry. It's hypocritical because they say, "Oh, we're just the messengers. We're just telling the stories of our lives. We're just telling it like it is. Blame the government. Blame the police for everything. Blame uh, white society. Whatever it is, blame everyone else." That is the mentality going on here, and yet at the same time, it's incredibly braggadocious. It's all about swaggering and saying you're only a real man if you're in a gang. Oh, look at me and my homies and my 12 bitches and so on. That is clearly a paradox. You can't sort of play the victim on one hand whilst boasting on the other. So there's an obvious contradiction there. Um, and here's another thing, you have these rap battles. It was featured in the film 8 Mile. They're famous in some inner city areas, particularly in the late 80s and early 90s when that started to develop. You have these rap battles where the whole point is to see who can kind of out big or out talk the next guy. Okay, I'm not using the vernacular here, I'm probably using the wrong terms, but you know what I'm saying. It's about trying to see who's quickest on their feet with the lyrics and so on. But it's all about being as egotistical as you possibly can in order to put down your opponent, right? That's what it's all about. So ego and narcissism runs deep within this industry. And then rappers come out and say, "Oh, well, don't blame us for gang violence. It's all the fault of the government and police." Well, again, I would say you can't have it both ways. You can't say, "Oh, we're big men. We're the hottest guys on the block, whatever it is," and then say that you've got no influence. That's bullshit. I think there needs to be a bit more honesty in the industry. So you cannot say we're just artists, don't shoot the messenger, but then boast about the influence that you do have. There's a fundamental hypocrisy in that. Um, I would also suggest that some of the subgenres of rap, I mean, I had a bit of a debate with one of my viewers on, I forget which video it was, I think it was about gangs. He said you can't ban drill music. Now, just to be clear, drill music is a particular subgenre of R&B, of rap. Believe it developed in Chicago in the early 2000s or early 2010s. It spread to London. It's toxic. Drill music is literally gang members. Most of the time, they're not even prominent rappers. They're well down the pecking order. Um, Literally boasting of their turf wars, brandishing knives, balaclavas. They look like bloody terrorists. Um, and they're literally promoting turf wars. You cannot tell me this is just music. You cannot tell me this is just art. I mean, these guys are literally promoting turf wars. There was actually a criminal trial in Manchester where the judge ruled that that was a motivating factor for a gangland killing. So I get a little bit sick and tired of seeing so-called rap stars treated like heroes. I mean, this is probably going to be blasphemous, but I'm going to say it. Tupac Shakur is made out to be a great hero, like a poet, like a philosopher. For what? I mean, I accept maybe within the industry he stood out for his particular work in terms of the construction of his lyrics or whatever. But I look at his lifestyle and I think, what's so heroic about this man? You know, did he build lots of youth shelters? Did he get young people away from gangs? If he did, I will stand corrected and I will publicly apologize. But from what I can tell, that was never what he was about. He was just like every other rapper, you know, live by the sword, die by the sword. And then young people look up to these guys like they're some sort of heroes, and it's rampant. And then it's just a cycle. You see the whole thing start all over again. You know, 15 and 16-year-olds who are looking up to these guys now will be in jail by the time they're 30, 35. And then what do rappers do? They say, oh, it's all the fault of the police. It's all the fault of the government. There needs at some point some damn responsibility, and rappers need to actually say, well, what am I promoting here? I'm not talking about the style of music. I'm not talking about the formation of what rap is, like really fast lyrics and rhyming and so on. I'm talking about the message that's being promoted. And whilst there may be some rappers who are actually responsible and they do responsible things, fact of the matter is, so many rappers um, embody a lifestyle that really is such a negative influence on society. And it's difficult to say this because people say, "Oh, you're a white guy. It's this is a racial thing." But I would say the same thing. I mean, take for example, if you have death metal or whatever, I think some of that is pretty toxic. Um, and I think it produces some very negative thinking in some of its young fans. I really, really resent this idea when people say, "Oh, you can't blame art for anything." That to me is extremely naive. Okay, most people are not going to go out, let's say, and watch a mob film, like say Goodfellas or Once Upon a Time in America, and go out and shoot someone. That's the vast majority of people are not going to do that. So I understand that people don't listen to rap songs and go out and assault someone, generally speaking, but I do think that connect is higher in rap than it is in other music genres. I do believe that. Um, because I've seen a lot of young guys in particular, they're in the rap music, and you can see their mentality change. You can see their attitude change. I just think it's extremely naive and extremely dishonest from artists within the industry to say, "Oh, we have no influence." It's bullshit. It's a lie. Um, so I just find the whole thing incredibly bleak and depressing because so much of it is negative. Can you honestly tell me that? Well, it's not for me to say how other people feel. I know how I feel about it. Maybe other people would feel inspired or motivated, and that's great. That's great for them. But so I'm not saying, oh, people have no right to feel whatever way they want about it. But what I am saying is the culture around so many rappers pretty much parallels the lyrics in their songs. So in that sense, I suppose they are biographical. But do not tell me that when an artist is singing about disrespecting women, promoting homophobia, promoting gang violence, promoting drugs, promoting fast cash, do not tell me that a 25-year-old or 30-year-old rapper who is doing that, promoting that to their 15-year-old followers, is anything other than a negative influence. And if they were saying, like, I've heard enough rap to understand that some of it is political, some of it's very clever, some of it even does send out a sort of learn from me message. I get that. I'm not saying that doesn't exist, but I am saying, particularly today, I mean, I've looked at this enough to know that there is some difference. For example, Gangsta's Paradise, Coolio, what they're saying, actually, there is some learning lesson from that. For example, I'm 23 now, but will I live to see 24? I just, the way things are going, I just don't know. So they are sending out the message in a sense of, that this is, it's not cool to be a gangster in that sense. So I do understand that. What I'm saying is there is a very obvious problem in the industry where it is about boasting about this lifestyle. That's irrefutable. Irrefutable. And anyone who says that's racist, you're just trying to um, make critique into something that's not. I understand that it's often associated with African Americans, so there's no way around that. It is. But I would say there is certain redneck music that promotes white supremacy, and that's toxic in that sense. All I'm saying is musicians have to stop pretending that they've got no influence because they do. They may not be policymakers, they may not be the people, yeah, I don't think you can blame musicians for everything, of course not. But I also think it's bullshit to say, oh, we wipe our hands of it. We have no responsibility. If you are a prominent artist, if you have millions of followers online, you've got responsibility. I don't care who you are. I don't care what sort of music you have. You've got responsibility. And all I'm saying is that I mean, here's the thing I find quite galling. A lot of the sort of culture is about demanding respect and about how tough they are. And yet, the slightest hint of criticism, it's very much, oh, it's racist. Oh, you don't understand the art. Oh, what was me? So they're actually very weak when it comes to criticism. I just think a lot of this culture, promoting, like I say, gang violence, fast cash, fast drugs, it's toxic. And yeah, I get it. You get that in the rock and roll world as well. Of course you do. I mean, the whole live fast, die young thing, the 27 Club. When you look at artists like Keith Moon of The Who, it's absolutely, I would never try to claim, oh, well, that's a better example for young people. It's just as bad. But I still say that you don't have the same level of problems with youth crime and gangland problems with any other genre of music as you do with rap and R&B. I don't think it levels up. I guess with in some of the red states, perhaps certain genres of music are closely linked to the gun industry. So I'm thinking of certain people, kind of rebel country, not pure country, not the Nashville sound, but some rebel country music is closely linked to the gun industry and gun promotion. So I would say that's just as damaging. Um, Trying to remember the guy's name. He was kind of rock star, semi-country rock star. He's a big Second Amendment promoter. Can't remember his name now. It slipped me, but he's pretty popular with his bass. He's a white guy. I would say he's an example of someone who's just as toxic as certain rap stars. So, anyone who wants to say, "Oh, you're being racist," I will call out, or rather, I will criticize any artist I feel is a bad influence. Anyone. I mean, even if I want to broaden this a little bit, I watched that biopic Rocket Man. I like Elton John. I like a lot of his music, but the way sort of drug use that he was doing, can't condone that. You know, these multimillionaire celebrities who treat drugs like a commodity and they just, I'm sympathetic where there's addiction concerned, but I do cringe when I see that sort of drug abuse going on. And it's not a case of holier than thou, because I've smoked, I've drank, I'm not pure. But when I see people snorting cocaine just because they've got the money, I can't respect that, particularly when that industry, fuels conflict around the world. Every time a wealthy pop star, rock star, or whatever snorts cocaine, or some wealthy city trader does it, they are actually making life difficult for small town farmers in Mexico and Afghanistan. In the end of the day, I believe everyone, myself included, has a responsibility to say, what am I contributing to this world? What am I putting out there? And if all you can contribute to society is promoting, like I say, fast cash, fast drugs, lots of women, then at some point you have to say, what am I contributing here? So if these rappers really have a conscience, I would say, like I say, some of them do have ethical concerns, some of them get political, but fuck it. I think the rap industry, that whole culture, much of it is just toxic. There, I've said it. Take this whatever way you will. If people choose to interpret it a certain way that it's not, that's nothing I could do about that. But I think these things need to be said. Musicians have to take responsibility.